I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people create lives of freedom and impact through success in tech sales and the pursuit of self-development. We have a great guest today, a unique guest who's a recruiting leader, Kent Hammer. And we're going to learn what recruiters are all about. Get inside their mind. We're going to learn about how to interview more effectively to break into tech sales, and also think about trade-offs between working in big tech versus startups. And we might even talk about whether recruiting is going to be the right career path for you instead of sales, and what it takes to succeed in sales. So this conversation is going to be fun. It's going to dance around to a lot of useful topics, especially if you're someone looking to break into tech sales for the first time. So if you guys enjoy this video, which I'm sure you will, I know I'm going to enjoy it, make sure to give the like button a love tap, because the YouTube algorithm loves that too. And we'll show this video to more people who could benefit from the message. Take notes and apply those notes and translate it into action to produce your own success, and share this conversation with more people who could benefit from the message. So Ken, thanks so much for being here. Let's dig into it. First off, how are you doing today? What's your typical day in the life?
I'm great. I'm good. Typical day is you bounce back and forth between recruiting calls, business development calls, debriefing, briefing, writing my newsletter, talking to VPs of sales, marketing candidates. It's a variety of different things.
So I want to understand your career trajectory, because sure. I thought you had told me in a conversation we had that you got into recruiting right out of college.
I did.
Yes, but tell us about your career journey.
Sure, it's interesting. So I started my recruiting in the industry in 1991, just out of college. I actually started out doing data entry and computer training for a large recruiting firm called Management Recruiters, which is very well known. I was there from 91 to 96. I rose up to assistant manager. Then I broke out, actually started my own firm in 1997. Ran that until 2008. And then I decided to just take a little break. Actually, I went to a client company of mine called Talent, which is a Bay Area software company. I wanted to go into talent acquisition to see if I could get into leadership. And I knew I had to start out as a recruiter.
Yep.
I was there 2 years, and then I was extremely fortunate enough to go to Zoom. And I started there a week before COVID started as a talent acquisition manager. I was at Zoom for 2.5 years. I got to a director level, managing a global team. And then summer of 2022, I decided to go back to my own firm again.
And so at Zoom, you were managing teams of managers and
correct.
I think responsible for 250 hires a quarter. And I'm curious, were you managing for hiring of salespeople, I'm assuming? Was it a range of roles?
Actually, I did all roles, all sales, all finance, all tech, because I managed different teams. My last role was managing, I actually had 8 managers and 75 recruiters globally.
Wow.
So we touched on all facets.
So, this channel is focused on sales, and using it as a vehicle to creating a life of freedom and impact. You make good money, build connections, build transferable skills. And what I wanted to ask you about, though, is what's a good reason for someone to get into sales? Because you told me that
sure.
You like people. That's not a good enough reason to get into sales.
It's not.
Funny.
So I think if you like a challenge, if you're very competitive, obviously if you're money driven, but I think really it's that if you like to break apart things, if you're curious, it's really the challenge. It's kind of the ultimate game.
Yeah, because you're always going to have a target that you're going to have to hit. And if you hit it, your target's probably going to be raised the next year. And I noticed that athletes do really well in sales because they have that edge. And I guess the point here too is that if you love people, that's not necessarily enough, because you will get paid to build relationships, and that's nice, but it's going to be intense. There's going to be some pressure. And as you put it, when we had a one-off conversation, you said you're going to get beat up a bit. So yes. Can you talk about the reality of this entry-level SDR role so people know what they're actually signing up for?
Yeah, I often compare it to somebody that's just maybe starting to box. So when you start the box, you're going to get hit and hit off, and it's going to hurt, but you learn how to counterpunch. That's exactly what you do when you begin to sell. You're well, and it's also somewhat of boxing. If you get knocked down, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's the saying how you get up.
Yep.
And you're going to hear lots of no's. It's going to be tough. But as long as you continually learn and how to overcome those objections, you get better and better, every day, every week. And eventually you go from BDR and you break out of that and go into an SMB AE to commercial AE, and then eventually enterprise AE. But those first couple of years are tough.
Yeah, and that's the key that you pointed to, is that you'll start to rise up to SMB AE.
Mm-hmm.
And then did you say sometimes it's mid-market AE, and then enterprise AE? What was that middle one you said?
So it's usually BDR, SDR, SMB rep, commercial AE, then enterprise AE.
Okay. So can we walk through some of the nuances of this trajectory? Like the SDR role, you're setting appointments, you're setting qualified meetings. Mm-hmm. Hopefully those are leading to opportunities from those meetings. That's what you're really going for, is qualified opportunities. And hey, if some revenue closes from your source meetings, you're going to be able to hang your hat on that to get promoted. And I think a lot of the audience is aware of some of those metrics, but once you get to like SMB account executive, mm-hmm. could you share any context on the nature of that specific role and like what makes it an SMB?
Sure. So SMB means the size of account you're selling to, and that typically means usually under 1,000 employees. And this is a closing role. So you're taking the lead from, start to actually the signature on the deal itself.
Yep.
And it's a big difference. Yeah, like you were saying, the BDR is you're creating leads and generating appointments and things like that, but you're not closing the deal.
And so in SMB, from what I've seen, it's a little bit more of a transactional sale. There's maybe a founder who's the decision maker that's pretty easy to access, and they're not going to be crazy big deals, but you're going to get a lot of at-bats, and that's going to be good to cut your teeth, especially when jumping and closing for the first time. Now, commercial, what is the typical size of the accounts you might be selling to there? And are there any other key differences in the leap from SMB to commercial?
Yeah, so there you're probably 1,000 to 5,000 employees. And then a very common question I'll ask somebody is, what is your average deal size?
Yep.
So an SMB rep, your average deal size it could be 10,000 to 30,000. Commercial, maybe it's 30 to 100. And then enterprise, and it's different now because it's ARR, annual recurring revenue. So I'm kind of going, so when deals were on premise,
yep.
years ago, they were much larger. There could be millions, but that was a one-time spend. So ARR, your deal size could be 250,000, but it could be over 5 years. So it's the same size deal, just spread out.
Yep, good call out. And then you've got the enterprise role, which is very strategic, mm-hmm. massive deals. There's going to be more stakeholders on the customer side that you're going to need to win over, a lot of more risk for the customer, and you just have to be. I imagine you're probably going on site more, but yes. Anything else you would add on the nature of like an enterprise sales role?
Yeah, very comfortable talking to the C-suite. You've got to have a certain kind of, I guess I call it gravitas, because you're giving presentations. You're talking to a variety of different people. Could be a CFO, CIO, CEO, and you have to adapt your message according to that audience, kind of to their language, which not everybody can do.
That's a great call out. There's a book I read, Sales EQ by Jeb Blunt, who I did have on the podcast, and Jeb was really great. And he's got so many good books. And Sales EQ is specifically about closing the complex sale. And it's funny, I'm losing my train of thought. I got it. Came back. Yes. He talks about a part of sales emotional intelligence for the complex deals is speaking their language. Mm-hmm. And so being able to tailor a pitch and a presentation to show them like, wow, these guys really care about us and they get us. And so there's just a lot more nuance at the enterprise level. Now, anything you want to riff on there? Otherwise, I had another question in a different direction that I wanted to take us.
Yeah. And somehow for a lot of people, the end all goal is to get to the enterprise level. But I will say it's changing. The sales cycles are becoming longer because there's more decision makers in the process. and sometimes it's more difficult to make your quota. You may only have 20 accounts, and if 18 of those accounts aren't buying, then you're not going to make your quota. So sometimes you're almost better off being in a small enterprise or maybe a larger commercial role.
Yes.
You have a larger territory, so you have more opportunities to make your quota.
That's something I've experienced, and I've seen it at Google Cloud and different companies where it's feast or famine in the enterprise. You might have 10 accounts, and 5 of them did multi-year contracts with competitors. And it just doesn't make sense. Now you could have a good patch and a big spender and it works out. But you just have less at bats. And to your point, the sales cycles can extend beyond a year, beyond and your quota is based on a year time frame. That commercial or mid-market, you can have customers that are big enough to do like pretty large deals, less red tape to get the deals done. And so the sales cycles won't be as long as the enterprise space, and you have more accounts to get more at bats. So that's a good point. And they're back at Google Cloud, there was this corporate segment that was like maybe like commercial digital native companies, meaning born on the cloud. They spent a lot on cloud, but they weren't quite enterprise, and it was their own flavor of like that commercial. And that was a good one. You could have a lot of big deals or a higher volume. So by the way, I wanted to ask you about how much money people can expect to make. People like to hear about the money. And so for say like some of these different roles, what are the ranges you've seen? Like say for an SDR, SMB,
So for BDR, you're probably talking about making a total of around 80 after one full year. SMBAs, let's say your base might be 80,000. Your on target earnings or OTE would probably be 120 around there. Commercial rep, 100 to 110 base, 200 on target.
Yep.
Enterprise, that can vary. Pretty big range, very widely. Anywhere a low side of base 140, high side 200. Yeah. So you're 280, 400.
Yeah. Imagine that $200,000 base. And let's be real, it's going to be the reps that have been around for a bit, probably. I mean,
yes. And if any younger AEs are watching this and they're going into those enterprise roles, be very careful if you're approached with an OTE of 390 and you're, let's say you're 6 years into your sales, lifetime. A lot of those roles where they got these incredibly high OTEs, you have to ask the right questions before taking that role, because in many cases those OTEs are unattainable. Okay, they're just trying to simply lure you in the door.
This is good. Let's dig into that real quick. Sure. What questions do you need to ask to and what's at risk here?
Sure. Well, I've actually on my LinkedIn page, I've got 17 questions every rep should ask before they're taking a sales role.
We'll have to link that in the description of the video. And guys, I linked Kent's LinkedIn, so you can make sure to follow him. He puts out great content and connect with him. So anyways, go ahead.
One of the key ones, you ask somebody, how many of your reps are making their number? What's the percentage? And then another one is, okay, out of the reps that have been at the company more than 2 years, how many of those reps are making their numbers? Ask what average deal size, like we alluded to before, so you can actually do the math. I mean, if the average deal size is 150,000 and you're expected to sell 2.5 million in that quota, it's probably not attainable. And that's why often if you get a comp package, let's say it's 140, 280, but the quota is $1 million, and you feel like the territory is good, you like your manager, the product's good, that is oftentimes a much better role than the 175, 350, where maybe it's a startup, it's an unproven product. No one's ever made their number. You will not make that 350.
So Ken, this is so relevant because one of my subscribers, Jahan, he's an SDR and he is crushing his numbers at a company, and I don't know what company, but he doesn't see an upside because he could go for AE, but only 10% of AEs are hitting their quota. And he said, Chris, do you have any videos out there? Because I'm not seeing it, how to navigate from a current SDR role to a better company externally as an AE. And so I actually am dropping a video on Saturday to talk about it, but it'd be cool to talk about it here and really get someone like you who has so much experience to talk it through. But one thing I did say in the beginning of the video that's going to post, is a little bit of tough love, is like making sure you're vetting companies up front. There's nothing you can do about it now. So would you say the same questions you just asked, you'd apply as an aspiring SDR looking to thinking like, oh, what's going to happen in a year?
100%.
The same questions. Can you say them one more time? And if there's any other question you'd add, if you're the SDR choosing your first company?
So how many reps? So what's the percentage of reps making their quota? What is the percentage of reps that have been here longer, either 1 year or 2 years making their quota? Questions like, how do you manage expectations with sales reps? You're asking the hiring manager. Is there an SE in my territory? What is the average tenure of your AE pool? And there's average sales cycle, average sales deal, just a variety of questions.
So good. So good. And so now to address his question of how do I move from an SDR role where I have crushed it to an external AE role at a different company, where the thing is he doesn't have the closing experience, even though he's crushed in his role. And I have ideas, but I'd just love to hear your perspective on how to, knowing that it's a little bit of a leap, how to best position oneself for that type of transition.
I would say it's not that big of a leap, because
really?
Companies are constantly looking for talented BDRs, the up and comers, to go to that next level.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's in the typical life cycle of a BDR is, if you're a BDR a year and a half, and you've got some performance metrics where you've shown you've made your quota or made your goals, you're ready for that next role.
Oh, okay. I'm being humbled right here, because I was like, hey, it's a big leap, but you're the one with the experience. So this is good to hear. This is good news for Jahan and anyone else looking to make the transition. Which, by the way, Ken, it seems that people are looking for this type of advice right here to solve this specific challenge.
Yeah, and the market's changing too, where a lot of the enterprise reps, they're getting a little more, they're getting older. So that pool is shrinking. So we need the next generation to backfill.
That's good news, man, for this audience. That is cool. So you were at Zoom, which boomed in the pandemic. Isn't that amazing? So many companies were struggling, and then all of a sudden the need for your solution accelerated and you guys crushed it. Yeah. And it must have been exciting. Can you tell me what it was like to be working there? That's one question at that time. And then I'd like to shift, just so the audience knows what's coming, to talking about working in big tech. And then I'd like to compare that to working at a startup so that the audience can think between the two. But first off, what was it like being at Zoom when it really boomed in the pandemic?
It was absolutely amazing. Hair on fire. I was so incredibly grateful for that time. I had an amazing team. They made me look good. But it was a lot of hours. It was probably 12 to 14 hours a day. And all of it was on video, which people now understand how draining that is versus a phone call. And it was just the thrill of it. And the little time you could go outside, because that was during COVID, I would have Zoom swag, as they call it, and I'd wear that and people would recognize it. And I thought that was so cool. So it was a really exciting time. Yeah.
And oh gosh, that's cool. And interesting comment on people being drained by meetings. And I wonder if it's more draining versus cold call. I mean, no, versus, we're always talking about cold calling, but versus call, because you have more senses engaged and you have to really observe,
It's probably 3 times more. And I don't think you can be as, not creative is not the right word, but so when you're on the phone call, typically if I'm making a sales call, you can get up and walk around. So your blood's moving, your brain's a little more active versus just sitting staring at a screen. And it's just kind of things kind of, it's very draining.
It's interesting, Kent, because there was a guy, John, that I'd worked with to help transition into tech sales, and he was in a physical labor job, like working on machinery and things all day. But wouldn't you know, he transitioned to tech sales and he was exhausted. Because it's just a different type of exhausting where you were mentally and emotionally on all the time. And from a science perspective, I'm no scientist, but I thought I read something about like glucose stores in the brain being depleted as you're making key decisions and engaging emotionally and trying to use your empathy and things. So don't quote me on the science, but that was crazy to see that someone going from a physically difficult job was just as exhausted, or if not more, from all the meetings and the mental and emotional taxation.
Couldn't be more. Yeah. If you're making, it depends what kind of role you're in, but if you're making 30 to 40 cold calls per day, it's very draining.
Yeah. And you know what? Over at AWS, I have a lot of friends there because I'm at an AWS partner. They have a lot of internal meetings, like constant meetings, and a lot of customer meetings, because those roles are more so account management. It's such a good platform. They invented cloud infrastructure. The customers are pretty happy, So it's interesting. They're constantly on meetings, more so than at another company where like there's less recognition and you're constantly hunting, trying to find those meetings. So some of my friends over there are definitely exhausted from that. And that is a reality of the role, So,
Right.
okay. So this channel, like we want to help people launch their tech sales careers. And launching your career at Zoom would be a life-changing opportunity. In big tech companies, I started at Oracle, could be AWS. And so, what are your thoughts on working in the big tech like Zoom? And why might that, what's it like, and why might an aspiring SDR want to consider big tech?
Well, so if you're an SDR, it's different than like if you're an enterprise sales rep.
Yeah.
I would lean towards a larger company if you're an SDR, because there's typically a team of SDRs that you're with. And it really helps the day-to-day because you can hear other people, what they're saying.
Yep.
And then if you get rejected, you can help get, you're motivated by your teammates.
Yeah.
Your manager typically is used to building SDR teams. And then also there's probably a better chance of a path to some kind of AE role at that company versus if you're a BDR at a Series B, which is unusual, but if you happen to be there and there really is only one other sales rep.
Yeah, good point. In a big enterprise tech company, you're going to get a lot of training and support. The leadership you work with is probably experienced in coaching up SDRs. You're going to have teammates that you can share in the highs and the lows. You learn best practices from each other, but also when you get rejected, you can kind of, it's funny how like misery can bring you together. And I experienced that at Oracle, right? And like you said, you probably have a more sure path to account executive. Like at Oracle, I'm even catching up with SDRs these days since I'm ex-Oracle and hearing about their experiences, and some of them I'm helping coach up a little bit. And they're telling me there's like point systems and a real structure to that is what you need to achieve in order to get to the next level.
Yes.
So at a startup, though, let's talk about startup now. It's the Wild West, isn't it? And you might be the only SDR, founding SDR, and they're not going to give you the hand holding. And there's like one AE, and you don't have as much brand recognition probably for the product. And you got to, it's more challenging. But is there anything you would add on the nature of an SDR role at a startup?
Well, I would say yes, too. And typically, you're not going to have the roadmap to success there, because they're more than likely it's going to be, okay, here's our target market. They might have some kind of CRM or lead, before you actually call, but it's going to be Wild West.
Yep.
So this is our target market. Here's your phone. Here's your computer. Here's your LinkedIn. Good luck. Versus a larger company, they'll have an active CRM, again, teammates around you, a very specific target market. You'll be trained on the message to deliver. And I would say too, to the people listening, I know remote work is very popular, and it is very nice to be able to work out of your home. I would try to find roles where you're in office. It's so important when you start your career, because again, you're around teams of people and you're learning. And there's a saying I use: when you're in your apartment or your house selling, you're in your own head a lot. And if you're getting rejected, it's just you. Versus you have 3 or 4 teammates around that are going through the same thing. You can build yourself up and like, okay, how can we do this differently? What did you do? What are your wins today? It makes a big difference.
Yeah, you know what? When I got a field role at Google Cloud, it happened to be in the pandemic, and the role took me out to LA, a new city, and everything was locked down, and I was depressed. And for me, I wasn't starting out as an SDR for the first time, but at 26, I was one of the youngest field reps at the organization, and it was a leap. I didn't have the typical experience. And so I was going to need mentorship. I was going to need support, and businesses other than Zoom were struggling in the pandemic. And so it was really difficult, man. I was failing. Like no one was really hitting their quota. Maybe if you covered Zoom, and I don't know what cloud infrastructure, if they're on AWS or Google Cloud, whoever the cloud rep was on Zoom, they probably did well. but you're struggling. And so I would have loved that support, man, that mentorship in office. And I haven't experienced that, later on in my career. So in person is really great, and boosting morale, sharing ideas, innovating. And if you get to the right company, I mean, obviously Google's an incredible one. Some of the perks in office are great. Some of these tech companies have great perks, don't they?
It's amazing. It's amazing how the world has changed.
Did Zoom have like a cool office, or were you remote? Or
we did. So we had a big office in Denver, then one in San Jose.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and of course it was games, bring your dog, snacks.
I mean, that's fun.
Theater room, room you could go chill. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And so with Google, it just reminds me, like, we had massage chairs. We even had masseuses. I was on the 27th floor looking out through glass skyrise into the lake, and I see people packed like sardines in the W Hotel in their pool, and all these snacks, man. And they put the most unhealthy ones at the bottom, so you
right.
And video games. So you get the point. Not that you use that, but I was going in as a single guy trying to grind. I was going in on the weekends, and it was partly because it was so nice. So yeah, I definitely would recommend like it in office versus remote. But some people like that flexibility. And if you have a dog or a family, I could understand, being there for the family. So I wanted to shift to talk about networking to get interviews,
sure.
And also interviewing. You have a funny perspective on interviewing, like it's going on dates. And so we're going to talk about that just as a teaser to the audience. But when it comes to networking and earn interviews, obviously, if someone can build a relationship or reach out to a recruiting leader like you or a recruiter at one of their target companies, that's ideal. And maybe they can, you guys set up a conversation, a screening call, and then get into the process. I wanted to get your perspective on how aspiring SDRs breaking into tech sales for the first time at a company they want to work at, how might they think about engaging? It could be with you, but you're a leader. So it could be with you, or like a recruiter who is more directly hiring for the role they want. I'd love your thoughts on that.
I think one of the words you said was conversation. That's key.
Okay.
Do whatever you can do this day and age to have a live conversation with somebody versus just applying, because the job application process has changed.
Okay.
And people who are watching this, you can often see these roles that are posted, and you'll see, 2,000 applicants in the first week. Well, a lot of those people do not fit that role. They're just applying for it. So I would do whatever you can do, have conversation, direct message, either the internal recruiter or the hiring manager. Do anything you can to separate yourself, to make yourself known, to make yourself stand out from the other applicants.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Some of the folks I've seen have success are sending direct messages on LinkedIn to the recruiter, hiring manager, even SDRs or account executives who would be their future teammates, can tell them about what it takes to succeed and can refer them for a nice little referral bonus.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, what's the deal with these referral bonuses? Because I've heard at some companies, you get paid a pretty penny if you refer someone and they get hired.
Yeah, they can range from probably $1,000 to $3,000.
Oh, okay.
Which is good and bad sometimes.
Okay, tell us your perspective, because my perspective is like, I'm reaching out to you as an AE or SDR, and I'm like, I'd love to learn about your path to success, and I'm about to get in the process. And ideally, I can help, you get paid, get a signing bonus. And I would think that could be a lever, but you say good and bad. So I'm curious to get your take.
Okay, it's a very positive thing if you're referring somebody that actually fits the job. But in many situations, unfortunately, and the person's trying to do a good thing, right? They're referring people that a friend that's not working or someone they know that needs a job.
Yeah.
And they may not fit that job.
Yeah.
So then it bogs down the whole system.
Oh, I see. So that's a little empathy for the, I guess, hiring team or the talent acquisition team. Is that the right term? Talent acquisition?
Exactly.
Okay. So, and you know what? I've had some people come to me for referrals at my current company. And I got to a point where I do say no a lot more, because I know what they're looking for and we don't want to waste anyone's time.
Right.
And it's not about, it doesn't usually do anyone any good just because you want to be a nice guy or girl to refer someone. So I appreciate that empathy. But hey, if you're working with, like if you have the relevant experience, or you've invested in a program, or working with a coach that really is good at what they do, and they're training you up, and then you know you can bring value, then yeah, like in that case, you should be confident to ask for a referral and maybe help someone get paid. But okay, so any thoughts on the nature of a message to someone like you, to if you're at the company that I want to work at, like what that message might look like?
Sure, clarity.
Okay.
So whether you're a BDR or even enterprise sales rep, I need to understand, what your accomplishments have been, and very quickly. So if it's a resume, I have to be able to pull it out quickly. And which is kind of contrary to this day and age of a lot of people are taught to just flood your resume with keywords. But a sales resume, I always tell people this is 3 things. What are you selling? How much have you sold? And who do you sell it to? And if I can't see that in 15 seconds, then your resume is not very good, in my opinion.
Yeah. So is that going, like in the actual experience itself, like I was at this company for this period, and you put it in there, or do you encourage like a little bio at the top on like, hey, this is what's unique about me and what I bring to the table and what I'm looking for?
Actually, both. You can put that in the bio. I mean, some of your top accomplishments, but then also under each role, like what you've done, what you've sold, what you did versus quota.
Okay. So ideally, you could even sneak it in the bio of like, here's the results I produced real quick, mic drop statement of revenue and who you've sold to, so yeah, that's ideal. Now, for someone who is going to break into tech sales and hasn't closed deals, but maybe they are in roles with transferable skills, like a barista, they're building relationships, in a fitness person, it could be a banker. What's your advice on how to translate their narrative to resonate?
So I would say, just like you were talking, I was mentioning that, okay, what did you sell? How much did you sell? So it could be things like you were saying, working in a restaurant, could be you were a fitness trainer. It could be any kind of athletic accomplishment, or you played sports, any kind of competitive situation. You sold door to door, anything that's going to make you kind of pop out and resonate with the hiring manager.
Highlighting results and the nature of the role being like customer facing. You're probably resolving issues, and you are impacting revenue as a server, by the way. Like,
oh, definitely.
Probably think through, if you really worked hard on it, like how many tables you typically saw in a night, and the typical check size, and maybe your commission's the tip. There's a way to tell that story.
Well, and you can think on your feet, and you can adapt to a different kind of human, because every table is totally different. And you can have issues.
Oh, yeah.
You can adapt your style to each table. And I was going to mention also, sometimes it's not the traditional cover letter, but you've got a resume and then kind of your story. You might have a parent that was in sales, any kind of like diversity you've overcome, any kind of challenge, because that's what sales is. And if you can explain that and talk to that just adds a little more color to your background.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And so now we could maybe shift towards talking about how to stand out in interviews, and understanding what hiring managers are looking for. And maybe we'll start there. What qualities are these hiring managers looking for in SDRs? Because you already mentioned some, like someone who's competitive, but what else would you add?
Coachable.
Okay.
Curious. So they ask really good questions. And then resilient.
Okay.
Give me an example of a time in your life you've overcame something, or give me some challenges you've overcome. Give me a time where you were played this sport, you got to this level in this many. Anything that we like coachable examples.
Yeah. So coachable, like tell me about a time you received a piece of feedback and how you implemented it. Resilience, as you said, like tell me about a time you failed or rejected. Curiosity, I think you were alluding to curiosity being, you can show that in action through the questions you bring to the interview when they're at
exactly.
Do you have any questions for me? And also in terms of behavioral questions, tell me about a time questions for curiosity. Do you think maybe, I mean, they might ask like, tell me about something you learned recently, or I think at an AE level, I know my SVP of sales, he asks, he shared his question list for like senior AEs that he wants on our team.
Mhm.
He's like, tell me about what you're learning about your industry, et cetera, to become more valuable to customers in your role.
Mhm.
So is there anything you'd add on the curiosity piece in terms of a question, or did that kind of?
No, so tell me, Mr. Hiring Manager, Mrs. Hiring Manager, what are the most common qualities of your top reps?
Mm.
Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Hiring Manager, why did you take this role at this company?
Ooh.
Tell me, where do you think this company's headed? And you can't say 5 years in technology because who knows? In 1 to 2 years.
That's
And then
great.
give me an example of, and this is kind of one of my favorites I use quite a bit. Okay, so let's say after you hire me, and you're being presumptive here, after you hire me as a BDR and you see me a year later and you were just thrilled with me, what did I do to accomplish that?
These are really good.
And it makes them kind of re-engineer. It's not just a job description.
If looking forward, you were thrilled with, I'm making my own version, thrilled with my performance. So happy with me as as someone on your team. What did I do to accomplish that? That's a cool way to frame what makes people successful and what am I looking for. So these are really good questions. Speaking of questions, again, going back to questions that we could be asked as going for an SDR role, we talked about some behavioral tell me about a time questions where the hiring manager is looking for underlying qualities like coachability, resilience, and curiosity. But one thing I've seen is role-related questions, and I know you have too, like how do you solve challenges related to the role you're doing for? So like, how would you make a cold call, or how would you prioritize a leads list? I remember when I had my Oracle interviews coming out of college, they're like, imagine you have a list of install accounts. That means you're spending with Oracle, and greenfield. Where would you start? And so are there any other like obvious role related questions you think someone might want to prepare for going for like an SDR sales role?
Probably related more towards the rejection piece is, what would you do if, let's say you got 22 no's in a row?
Oh,
What's your next call like? How do you plan for the next day? What's your attitude when you get home?
That's good. I love that. I'm glad I asked you that, because you know what? I've heard of some SDRs, or someone who kind of failed in sales development. They look back on their career because now they've moved on a different path because it wasn't the right fit for them. But they said they'd make a call and get rejected, and it'd take like 30 minutes to recover emotionally. And you just can't be productive. You have to kind of you have to be a resilience machine. So that's a relevant question.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, it really works both ways. So what I was taught years ago was whether it's let's say in recruiting, if you lose a deal or you lost a placement, you can either wallow in it or you just get right back on the phone and win the next one.
Amen.
Conversely, if you win the deal or get the placement, you don't celebrate and shut down for a week. Yeah, you celebrate, but let's get right back at it.
Yeah.
So you don't have the dips in production.
And so that's a key insight too for cold calling. I've heard it said many times that you set a meeting, double down on that momentum and ride it to the next one. Of all things, that's the time to keep going. Don't go wrong.
And it really is, it's a numbers game. It's metrics.
Yeah.
And you've got to figure out, and usually you can typically, depends on what you're selling, how many calls or outreach or messages does it take to get that lead or that appointment? And eventually you're going to figure that out in that first month. So you just know if it takes me 27 calls, 27 outreaches to get that one appointment, and if I have to get 10 appointments a month, 270. It's just math. And if you look at it that way, then the rejection doesn't bother you as much, because it's like, I just need to get these. If I get this many numbers, this will happen. It'll work.
It's like the law of averages. I heard an anecdote about Babe Ruth. It might have been from a book where he's bottom of the ninth with bases loaded, down by 3, 2 outs, and the pitcher throws the ball and swing and a miss. He misses pretty badly. He almost falls over and gets back in the batter's box. Another pitch, swings and misses so bad he actually does fall to his knee. And I don't know if this is exactly true, but let's go with the story. And he's got 2 strikes, down by 3 bases loaded with 2 outs. This is it. And the pitcher winds up and he hits a home run and wins the game. And afterwards, the reporters are like, "Babe, you didn't seem to be nervous at all." And he said, basically, like he knows that he puts in the work and the at bats and the swings, and he trusts in the law of averages, and it's only a matter of time that I'm going to succeed. And the pitcher's the one who should be afraid. And so I feel like it's similar with, if you could just keep showing up and keep going, the law of averages will eventually
definitely
click in, or yeah. So.
And it also helps your stress level, because you're not focusing on, will I have a job in 6 months? Will I make my quota or my expectations? If I just know I come in every day, here's the number I need to hit one day, 30 days to hit this, goal, it will happen.
Yeah.
If I'm sending a good message out, asking good questions, and if I'm, again, coachable, it's going to work.
Absolutely. Talk about an encouraging message right there. And, as a kid, I was a real perfectionist, and I still struggle with it at times. And my mom told me that she took me to an art, or went to pick me up from like art lessons. And the teacher's like, "I have to talk to you. Your son is so upset, and he says his art's horrible, and he won't even do the art, And so like you throw a whole fit about it. And so as a kid, I was really perfectionist. And I feel like sales has been a great vehicle for self-development, to learn to not overanalyze, because it's like rejection failure therapy. You fail enough, you realize it's
100%.
not real. And one thing I've been really committed to this year from an intentions perspective is detaching from outcomes and accepting. And so I just think that one of the core themes of this channel is using sales as a vehicle to self-improvement.
Yes.
And, do you think there's any other aspects of self-development that are catalyzed by a career in sales?
What do you mean by that?
So one is that you become, if you allow sales to develop you, you become more detached and accepting. You build thicker skin. And I'm curious if I guess I have plenty of ideas myself, right? Like I've learned that my ego and need for significance can get in the way of connecting with prospects, because I'm projecting how I want to communicate and proving I'm valuable rather than listening. And so you don't have to have an answer. It's kind of a tough question. It's more, I'm projecting my own vision for what sales is. But do you have any other thoughts on how like sales could help make you a better person?
Yeah, and actually you just said it. If you go into with the attitude, really all you're doing is trying to help that customer.
Yeah.
Solve a problem. And that's all your goal is. The questions you ask, your attitude is going to be different to them versus trying to push something to them. You're trying to pull. Absolutely. And I think if you had the attitude as a salesperson, and I know this holds true to recruiting too, because it's sales. And I used to ask my recruiters, what do you think you are skill level on a scale of 1 to 10? And if anybody ever said a 10, I'd say you're completely wrong. You can never be a 10. And that's the beautiful thing about sales and recruiting is you can always be learning and getting better.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you in a bit, as we start to head towards the end of this conversation, about the differences and similarities between sales and recruiting. However, I still had a little bit more to ask you about for interviewing. And one,
Sure.
We have to hit on your metaphor of interviewing being like dating. So
Exactly.
I think that's fun. Tell us about how is interviewing like dating, and what can we learn from this parallel?
So interviewing, you go through a number of dates. You eventually get the offer. You take the job. Dating, you go through a number of dates. You eventually, in some cases, I hope if it's the right person, you get married.
Yeah.
And each step in the process is a bit different. You build that, I guess, attachment. Well, I guess one of the biggest pieces of advice I give in that first interview is treat it like a first date. If you're interested in the role and the job, make sure that hiring manager knows your interest. that will lead to the second date. Just like if you're on a first date with somebody and you enjoy that date and you like that person, you'll tell them, hey, I really had a good time tonight. I want to do this again. You won't just get out of the car, just drop them off and say, see ya. So that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and hey, you gave me some coaching in my own dating life, because I actually have had a third date and should have a fourth. And
fantastic.
You played after the second date. We were talking about this theme as we prepared to set up this interview. And I'm like, oh, I was thinking of waiting this long, but you're like, no, don't wait that long. You need to make it clear you're interested.
Yes.
And so there's something to it. So thank you for helping positively impact my dating life. And this tip is going to help positively impact people in interviewing for their tech sales job that they're trying to land, because you do have to show intention and interest, don't you?
You do. And just like you did, the follow-up. Not only do you tell that person that I'm interested, after each step, you've got to do the proper follow-up. Thank you, email or a message, whatever. I get it. You are interviewing for a sales job. That is part of the sales process, is follow-up. You're just showing them an example of how you're going to act in the job.
You need to take ownership as the candidate of that follow-up, because these recruiters, these hiring managers are busy with their slacks lit up like a Christmas tree, to quote Chris Orlob, who's another great guest that I had on, that he was at Gong and helped grow that company in sales. And now he's got a cool platform called P Club IO for sales training. And he said that, like, trying to give a little empathy for how busy these recruiters and hiring managers are. And it's not personal, but you're not the only thing they're working on. So it's our job to follow up, reinforce our interest, reinforce why we're a fit. And one thing Chris had said too, which was interesting, is he said, ask about like why they're hiring for the role. And maybe you could connect it to like, oh, we're trying to increase revenue in the organization by this much, and we need an SDR to help generate pipeline for the AEs. Sure. And so have you ever heard that before or advised on that? Yeah, I'd love your thoughts on it, because that was a new thing. I actually never even did that myself, but I thought it was a good nugget.
Sure. And if you're talking to internal recruiters, some will know that, some will not. Another way to ask that too is, so what happens if this role is not filled in 6 months?
Oh, that's good.
How does it impact the company? Yeah.
And it's so cool is this is sales. That's what I ask my prospects that I'm trying to close deals on. Close deals on. Funny way to put it. What happens if this project doesn't get done in 6 months? What if you don't hit? So, and boom, then you have the pain and the cost and the driver to, when you follow up, just to connect the dots, you can reference, and I understand that you had said that you needed this role hired in the next X amount of months for this reason, and I'm eager to meet that need. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else on interviewing. You did mention in our conversation one-off that if the chemistry is not there, it's not there. And it tied back to a theme of like not trying to be a perfectionist and say like the perfect things. But do you remember what I'm talking about? I was curious.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd love your thoughts on that perspective.
Sure. Like I was saying, there's not going to be ever a perfect interview. You're going to maybe say things you wish that you would have said differently, or something will come out strangely, or you won't be able to answer the question. But the fact that you're there, first of all, they like your background, right? You're there in that interview. And if you do the right thing 80% of the time in the interview, you're well beyond anybody else they're talking to. And like you were just saying, there is some chemistry element of it. If you feel like there's kind of a match of, every hiring manager's got an idea of kind of almost like, not an image, but this is the type of person I want to hire. And when they sit down across from you, either it's going to really click or it's not.
Yeah, that's a good point. And everything comes down to that chemistry with your hiring manager, because your manager is going to make or break your experience at the company that you work at. You could be at the greatest company in the world, but if you have a tough manager situation, it's going to be less than ideal. So obviously, you need to see if there's chemistry. And don't you think you need to vet out too, to see if the manager is going to be someone who actually is a good mentor and coach? Like, do you have any thoughts on the importance of vetting out that hiring manager that you might work for?
Oh, hugely important. Yeah, because that will definitely make or break your success in a role.
Yeah.
And that's another point I wanted to make too, is sometimes people get too caught up in, I call it the shiny penny. Let's say it's a Bay Area Series C company and they sell a really sexy product.
Yeah.
But the actual job itself may not be very good. Maybe the territory is too small. Maybe the quota is too big. Maybe the manager isn't good. Maybe you want a manager that's going to make you a better person and a salesperson. Bottom line. Conversely, you can have a company, maybe it's a boring, stodgy tech company, but that sales role might be an exceptional sales role.
Yeah.
Because the territory is great. The quota is small. They've got accelerators. The manager is incredible. You click with that person. So be more focused on the job itself than the company.
Ooh, that's so good. That is so good. So don't get caught up, I think, unfortunately, a shiny penny.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much about the company, but it's the specific role. Because you could have a role with the right territory and timing where you're set up with a achievable quota, where you're more likely to make commission and you have a better leader you're going to work for, that role at a lesser known company is better than a crappy territory and bad leadership at a big, quote unquote, sexy company.
Exactly.
That's what I'm
exactly.
hearing. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen resumes littered with, 9-month or 6-month job stints when they keep on chasing those companies.
Oh yeah.
And they get these, like I always say, if you get a base of, let's say 175 with an on target of 350, but you're there 9 months, really you're making 135 and that's it. Because you probably didn't make any commissions because you didn't sell anything and then you got riffed.
Yep. So, and that's a key thing for people to get is not all tech sales roles are created equal. And
no, not at all.
What you actually make is different than the promise that might lure you in the first place. So, okay. I just had one more, it might seem random, but it's intentional question around interviewing. When it comes to delivering good answers for role-related behavioral interview questions, I imagine it's important to be succinct. And I'm curious, do you have thoughts on the typical time length and how to structure answers in tech sales interviews to instill confidence?
I would say no more than 30 seconds, your answer.
No. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I've broken that rule and I've managed to get by. But the reality is there's some interviews or roles I missed out on because I was too wordy. So audience, listen up, 30 seconds. Wow.
I've actually counseled people to literally get in front of a mirror and get like a timer.
Yeah.
And go through a series of questions and answer those questions. Set the time. And if you're 30, 45 seconds, that should be tops.
Unbelievable. That is so good to get the perspective of a recruiting leader. This is the real deal. And so you basically deliver succinctly in 30 seconds. You might use the STAR framework: situation, task, action, result. I know a lot of top companies like AWS. I go back to them a lot because I work with them and they're an amazing company. But they're kind of a standard. They like that. And so is the point to give them a quick answer of what they're looking for and then allow them to double click for more detail if they want to?
I would say quick, succinct. And that's selling. If you're selling to a customer, you want that customer to be talking more than you are. So quick, clear answers. People that talk one, that's a kind of a sign they won't be great salespeople because they'll be talking more than asking questions. But you try to hide the answer in a long answer, hide the facts in a long answer.
So good. We've gotten such gems in this conversation that people can apply to land a great job in tech sales and also even understand if sales is right for them. And to that end, I had a question about the similarities and differences between sales and recruiting. And I will say, I know people in my sphere like Kaylin Wright, who's super inspiring. We did a podcast. She was a sales leader turned recruiting leader, and she's so much happier and fulfilled as a recruiter. So I will share that. So I'd love to hear a perspective on sales versus recruiting.
Well, recruiting is definitely it's sales. And this is just my humble opinion, but I think it's the most complex selling job on the planet.
No way.
Because you're selling two humans. You've got a hiring manager and a candidate. software, you've got a buyer and a piece of software that can't speak and can't change their mind, and at any second doesn't have other offers. So it's a very, very complex cycle where you're dealing with human beings that are unpredictable.
So Kent, real quick, it's like you're selling a candidate on working for you, and that they're emotional creatures, they're human beings, and you're selling the hiring manager and the hiring committee on this candidate too. So it's like a dual process.
Yes.
Selling multiple audiences, and you hope it lines up. So anyways, continue on.
Exactly. Well, it's just like if you're selling to a company selling software, every buying process is different. Every hiring process is different. It may be good or bad. That's the difference. Your software typically will work, typically one way, but every candidate will act a different way because they're human beings. So a lot of what this job is, and it kind of teaches mantra, it's words and actions. What you're doing tells me a lot more than what you're saying.
So as a recruiter, you can make good money. And imagine you're a recruiter at Zoom, working for Zoom full time. And do recruiters make money in addition to a base salary on each candidate that's placed? Is it at like a percentage of their salary, or like what's the compensation model and upside for an internal recruiter?
No, not typically with an internal. They'll have a base salary, then a bonus on top of that.
Okay. Got it.
And then their manager it's their discretion on what percentage of that bonus will be paid out. Typically, you do have a quota of hires per quarter. And if you meet that, you get the bonus.
Oh, okay. So it's not per candidate.
No.
Okay. Interesting. So that's good to know. And then if you're an outside recruiter and you have your own firm, you get, what is it? It's lucrative. It's like a percentage of the salary.
So there's three. So internal, very different role. It's one's much less stressful. Depends how you define stress, right? It's still stressful.
Yeah.
External recruiter, if you work for an agency, you get a percentage of your production. So let's say you do $600,000 in production, you will bring home about 40% of that.
Oh, that's good.
If you are an independent like myself, you get 100% of the fees you take in, but there's also expenses like health insurance and ATS system in advertising. But there's a lot more risk to that too, because you have zero salary. Versus an agency, you get a small salary, then you get percentage of the production you bring in.
Yep. But you get a handful of clients going, good ones, and you get those full commission or the full compensation, and you don't have to, all for you as your own agency. It can be very lucrative. And and one of the question is, before we talk about your vision and what you're building, and then the action to wrap up, is why would recruiting be a better fit for someone than sales?
Okay, this is a strange answer, but it's true. So I would say 90%, maybe 80% of external recruiters like myself probably have some form of ADD. And you're really, really good at doing a lot of different things kind of quickly, and you like that. You like the pace of it.
Yeah.
Which it's constantly a new thing every 30 minutes. And you have to jump from one search to the next where you're pitching this to that. And it's very rewarding to your brain.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I was never tested for ADD because my mom didn't want me to get labeled, but my therapist laughed when I said, I think I might have ADD.
You're like, yeah.
So, maybe it's a product of the world we live in, right? A lot of us might have a little, kind of, at least.
I think it's the sales in general, Chris. I think people are drawn to it because that's where you're not in accounting, because you can't sit in front of a spreadsheet the entire day and figure out columns and things like that. Yeah,
but the whole point of that is that you make me think I might like recruiting. So I appreciate you illuminating also what the recruiting world is all about.
Sure.
And I'd love to finish up just talking about what you're up to lately and your vision for what you're building.
Sure. So I've recently brought in actually an ex-VP of sales from Zoom that I worked with, and he's working with me on a part-time basis.
No way.
So we bring a pretty unique, I think, value to our clients, to where he's hired hundreds of young salespeople, young growth salespeople, so we can vet people a certain way before we present them. And we work with companies nationwide, and I work with people from BDRs to CROs. And I'm also kicking off a coaching program in the middle of next month, helping people that are either struggling in the job market or want to get a better role. And it's a bit different than most, where I'm not rewriting resumes or LinkedIn, which might get you the interview, but if you interview poorly, you're not going to get the job. So what I'm going to work with people is actually how to interview and do mock interviews step by step.
That's really great. And interviewing is everything. I noticed there are people that it's great on them. They do what's needed to get interviews. In fact, one guy recently cold called the hiring manager that I was working with, and he got an interview with a great company. But the interviews are a whole different beast, you know. So once you get in, you got to interview with precision. So it sounds like working with you, I mean, people would have a unique opportunity to learn from someone who's hired. It helped many people get hired over the years. So, and working at top companies. So definitely going to link your LinkedIn profile. And I'm trying to think, what other links could we include just for the audience to check you out?
Sure, I could put some of the articles I posted and written in the past few months. I think they'd find those valuable.
Awesome. Yeah. So guys, connect with Ken on LinkedIn. And I've seen his articles. They are really valuable. And yeah, he might be the guy to help you get into tech sales. And of course, I have to plug, I usually do it in the beginning of my interviews, but I've got my curriculum, Tech Sales Accelerator, that I've linked in the description of this video as well. And for some of my students that are in Tech Sales Accelerator, it might be interesting to pass them your way. And between Kent and I, we got your back to launch your career. I'm curious, Ken, any other final words of inspiration to our, you know, like mostly 20 to 30 something aspiring tech sellers?
One final thing would be this, because I know a lot of people that maybe they're BDRs or want to get into tech sales. Maybe their parents had 2 jobs their entire careers, or even 1 job, and they think tech sales is scary. Just be okay with, if you're going to be in software sales for 30 years, you will probably have between 8 and 10 jobs. And that's okay.
Interesting.
And you have to be just comfortable with that. And it's typically never there's lots of situations why that occurs. It could be an acquisition. It could be you just simply going to a better job. The manager changes. Yes. But you're going to change jobs often, which isn't, again, a bad thing. It's just the nature of the beast. That's
such a good point. And just to emphasize, like in my career in 10 years, I've been at 3 companies, Oracle, Google, now my current startup, Bespin. And yeah, I think Oracle had layoffs just after I left. So I would have to deal with that. And then Google, after my first year, eliminated the inside sales org. And I got that field promotion at a young age because I was resourceful and I had a network to get there. But they basically told us, you guys, your jobs are being eliminated. You have 3 months to work with our mobility team. So I could have been out on the street then. They did give nice severances, though, for those who didn't find a new job. But those are just a couple examples, right? Like you get acquired. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so it's an exciting space, but you have to accept, to your point, like you're probably not going to be at the same company your whole career. But you can like turn it into more money. So really very wise call out there.
Sure. I'll end on this. Really, the best job security you can have in tech sales is to make your number. Yeah. You will always have a great job.
And absolutely. That's the cool thing about this path is if you deliver the results, you will never have an issue getting work. And even if you got somehow laid off, for whatever reason, it could be out of your control, you can have confidence that you hit your number and take that with you into your interviews and just, it's undeniable. You hit your number. So Kent, this has been such a great conversation. Like, it's amazing to be able to learn from your experience as a recruiter at top companies and also doing your own thing. I'm excited for people to connect with you and your resources to help them be successful.
Yeah, I am as well.
And to the audience, thank you for your time and attention and for investing in your personal and professional development and your tech sales dreams. To your success in tech sales and in life. Happy selling and happy living. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.